Evening everybody, and welcome to tonight's presentation by Greg Gunther. Greg is a colleague of mine through Mindshop, and he's going to give us a great presentation tonight on strategy in your business and I guess mapping out a strategic future for your business. Greg is a fantastic consultant based in Toowoomba, working all through southeast Queensland, and we're lucky to have him here tonight. So thank him for his time, and I'm looking forward to a great webinar. So Greg, I'll hand over to you, and we'll go from there. Thanks, mate.
Thanks, Russell, and welcome everybody, and good evening. From wherever you are, I just had a quick look through the audience, and there's actually a couple of familiar names there that I've come across before, so welcome to you guys, and welcome to everybody else as well. What I want to do in this next 30 minutes or so is to just walk us through. I've been around now for a little while, and I've come across quite a number of issues, even experienced some of these things for myself, and one of the things that I've found is that we tend not to be very good at taking our plans through to what I'm calling here execution. It's like we might do a reasonably good job at some of the planning and the strategic planning part, but what we fail to do, or what we are not very good at, is actually taking it through to execution. So I'm keen to just take us through some of the steps that I've learned through the times that I've been working around, even in my own business and with other people now since that, to help you actually hopefully learn, adopt some of the things that might help you take this to the next level. Happy to take questions as we go. There is a question box, so please feel free to just jot things in there. I've got it open, so I can have a look at that as we go along, if there's things that come up that you're not sure or need more clarity on as I'm speaking. So feel free to jot that in. And as Russell mentioned towards the end, I'll certainly allow some time and welcome any questions from you as we go along after that towards the end. So, as I said, what are the things we need to talk about? And one of the frustrations that I often used to feel when I was particularly in business for myself was the number of times that I actually planned stuff. I sat down with my team, I've even in my own head planned a lot of things, and just, I guess, felt the frustration of that, 4 months, 5 months, 6 months, even 12 months down the track, that really not a lot had happened for various reasons. And I'm sure a lot of you are in business for yourselves and probably feel the tension or the conflict that you feel when we get busy, and we just gravitate back to the things that typically we're used to, but obviously in demand or immediate pressure of our need. And a lot of these things tend to get a little bit put on the back burner accordingly. So we end up 4 or 5 months down the track, and really not a lot of what we thought about has happened at all. The reality is that, and this is actually a statistic that's been researched, that typically companies only realise something like about 60% of their strategies value because of the breakdown between this planning and execution. And my goal, as I said, in this particular webinar is to try and help bridge the gap, try and understand what it is that helps us walk between taking planning from the planning stage right through to actually having something that's fully executable in our businesses. So that's a huge percentage, like 60%. There's a lot of value that's just not being realised by people when they actually go through this process. So that's enough for us to really be motivated to think about, well, how can we actually take our strategy from planning through to its full execution. So for mine, there's 3 sort of key elements of this, and this is something that I've sort of talked about a little while. Russell has heard me talk about this before when I've spoken to some of the Mindshop people about it. For me, there's 3 elements. The first one is direction, and I'll walk us through a little bit about direction when I get into the body of this presentation. But essentially what we talk about when we talk about direction is setting up, what is it? What is the way forward? What are the sort of things that it is that we want to achieve for ourselves? So it's, if you like, it's goal setting, it's objective setting, and the like. And look, to be honest, a lot of us are not too bad at that. We sort of, even if it's in our own head, we tend to have a little bit of a feel or sense of what it is that we want to do. Might be a bit vague. Not many of us commit it to paper, document it, but essentially there's this vague sort of feeling that we have some idea of what direction it is we want to take. It's the next two where we really fall over, and as business owners, if you're in your own business, accountability, it's very hard for ourselves to, or keep ourselves accountable, and that's one of the big failings for a lot of us. We're just not very good at it, and once we sort of commit ourselves to something, unfortunately it's very easy for us to excuse ourselves for not actually having got it done, because we're not necessarily answerable to anybody else. So accountability is a big issue. And of course the third bit for mine then becomes about execution, and what I mean by execution is actually the physical implementation, and there's a number of reasons why we're not really good at execution. A lot of it, like I'm working with a group at the moment, they're actually accountants who had a meeting with them this morning, and it's a 4-partner practice, and the big issue for them is that, look, we're just so time poor. We just don't have the time to physically get towards this sort of stuff, and that's a big issue for us. We're often very time poor, and there's a lot of issues that sort of arise on a day-to-day basis that we find ourselves being drawn to address in a business. So for me, it's about direction, setting direction. It's setting up some levels of accountability, and then of course how are we actually physically going to execute that? What are the sort of mechanisms and management systems that we put in place to make sure that we actually get the stuff done? And it's these three areas that I want to talk about over this next few minutes. So for mine, there's actually 3 steps to this. There's 3 questions that we really need to ask ourselves, and this might seem a bit simplistic, but frankly, I've used this methodology now for quite some time, and it works. So the first thing we need to ask ourselves is about our now, and this is where we do need to start getting brutally honest with ourselves. Unfortunately, a lot of us, we fluff this stuff up a little bit. We want to sort of think about all the good things or the nice things that maybe don't necessarily dig down to the actual brutal truth, and consequently we tend to get results that are less than satisfactory. So in our now, we really do want to get down to the brutal facts and be brutally honest with ourselves about that. I want to show you a tool. Some of you may have seen it before, but I just want to take it to a slightly different level than maybe you have before, to help understand how we might actually physically get down to that brutal level. The next thing we want to ask ourselves is, where is it that we wanted to go? And there's a little mechanism or a tool that I'm going to introduce you to in this webinar that can help you maybe crystallize or even think about what that might look like for yourselves. But once we understand that, we've effectively created ourselves this gap between the now and the where, that could sort of say, well, this is where we are now and this is where we would like to go to. Effectively, there is this gap. Well, we need to think about, well, what does that actually physically mean? In terms of timeframes, I would, most often when I'm in business, working with business, I tend to think in an order of 2 to 3 years. There was a time in my corporate career when that was actually even 10 years. And to be honest, the effort that went in, consequently, because we were projecting so far out, was, I'd have to say, mediocre at best, because it was just so far out that, there's going to be so much change that, it just really didn't, frankly, mean very much to us. And of course, today we are living in a very fast-moving world. Technology is moving along so quickly that, to go beyond 2 to 3 years, frankly, starts to put us in an area where, it's just so unknown that it's very hard for us to really bring it down to anything that's particularly meaningful. So 2 to 3 years tends to be the sort of timeframes that I like to think about. Once we've established the gap between the now and the where, it really then comes down to this third bit of, how in fact are we going to do that? And, when I talk about direction and accountability and execution, it's really in this where and the how that we start to get into this area of, really who's going to be accountable and, what are the sort of things that we need to put in place in terms of actions to fully deliver on what our goals and objectives really are. So that needs to be quite specific and focused around a lot of those things. And again, I'll focus on that a little bit further on in the presentation itself. So let's talk a little bit about the now. We'll start focusing on the now, and one of the things that for mine that and you may have come across this before when you've actually done some of your own planning. We talk about often a thing called a SWOT analysis, which is SWOT's just a meaning for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. From my experience, the SWOT analysis tends to be just slightly underdone because it doesn't dig deeply enough. And the question I like to ask when I'm conducting this particular exercise is, so what? And I'll walk you through that in a second just to help you understand what I mean by that. But the strengths and weaknesses that we often identify for ourselves, even the opportunities and the threats, tend to be at a relatively high level. And in terms of the connection as to what it actually means for us, doesn't really come through that clearly. So the question I like to ask is this so what question. And you may have heard in the past that there's a common thing: if you want to find the truth of something, you need to ask 5 times. This rolling 5 whys, or why 5 times before you can really get down to the essence of the truth. This is a similar sort of analogy that I'm using, or line of thinking that I'm using here to get down to that. So if in the first instance we are looking at and this is the SWOT, or the so what analysis, is really looking at the strengths, the weaknesses, the opportunities and the threats. There's 2 levels of analysis that we're looking at here. First of all, when we talk about strengths and weaknesses, we are talking about internally to ourselves. We're talking about our own organisation. So we want to understand from within our business or from within our organisation, what are our strengths and what are our weaknesses. Once we've achieved that, the next piece, or the second bit of this, then becomes looking outward and saying, well, what is the external context? What are the potential opportunities and threats that purvey out there outside of our organisation that we might be able to or need to even pursue or address in our organisation. So if we just look at these individually, if we first of all look at strengths in terms of our internal context, we might, and really what we're looking at here is trying to come up with the characteristics of our business that are going to give us an advantage over others. So these are the sort of things that are evident, if you like, from within our business. And it might be that our observation is that we have a happy, enjoyable workplace for staff, and hopefully you have that. And a lot of organisations I'm working with at the moment, that's actually not the case. They have something quite different to that. But if it was a strength that we had a happy, enjoyable workplace for our staff, the question I would be then asking is, well, so what does that actually mean? If that's the case, what does it mean? So it might mean that it means that we're more productive, perhaps. It might mean that they show a lot of initiative, or that they take responsibility, and you can even go further than that, and you can say, well, if that were the case, what might that actually mean? It could mean that if we've got that sort of level of intuition or initiative from within our staff, it could be that one of our strengths is that we are able to identify opportunities perhaps a little bit earlier. So if you can understand where I'm sort of rolling with this, it's really sort of digging beyond the sort of superficial happy, enjoyable workplace to trying to understand more deeply, what does that actually mean. If we look at the next one there, company reputation for excellence and getting the job done, that could be that we have a very good, strong relationships with our client base. It could be that we are recognised in the marketplace as providing this excellence, and that people want to come back to us, or they might be offering us a higher level of referrals, for example. Maybe they're prepared to talk more openly about us to others. It might mean that we're actually getting perhaps suppliers who are wanting to give us some level of preferential treatment because we have such a strong reputation in the marketplace. So the suppliers may want to be more inclined to want to give us extra business, or give us some sort of preferential supply arrangements potentially. And I've actually got one client where this is in fact the case. We've actually been able to build a very strong relationship with the supplier company to the extent now where, I guess the ultimate was that they were flown to Italy, which is the main centre of the supplier. That's their head office, and they flew them out to Italy just a matter of only 6 weeks ago to help them understand a lot more about the particular company. And as a consequence of that, they've actually now been introduced to a lot of other international people that they potentially now have direct contact with. It's going to take them to another level again. So again, what I'm trying to get across or convey in this whole analysis is to dig a lot more deeply than just the surface thing. Similarly, when we look to our threats or our weaknesses, weaknesses, these are the characteristics that again are prevailing within our business that potentially place us at a disadvantage relative to others. And again, we need to be brutally honest with ourselves around this. We can't fluff this stuff up. We really do need to be honest and understand exactly where it is that we sit in the marketplace at this point in time. So, the examples I'm giving there, if we have lack of proper processes, very, very common problem that I come across. And what that creates, of course, is inefficiencies. It's quite costly. One of the things that we talk a lot about within the Mindshop community is things like wastage and the importance of taking wastage out of businesses. And you may or may not realise, but in any business that I walk into, I could almost guarantee to you that I'm going to find somewhere between 25 to 40% of what we call wastage, where we've got these sort of inefficiencies. And rather than having to go straight into a cost-cutting exercise, if you start to focus on some of those things, potentially you actually realise some of those gains just simply by analysing some of these weaknesses. So again, the importance of digging deeply. Another big weakness that I come across working with people is this lack of clarity in job roles. And if we take that to another level, we would understand that if we have that lack of clarity, it frankly leaves big gaps where people potentially are missing things and mistakes get made. People assume that other people have got responsibility. The sort of language you often hear is, well, actually that's not my job, it's somebody else's, and the like. So that can be a big one. Lack of resources to explore new opportunities and showcase our strengths. Again, that could potentially mean that we're missing opportunities, is the implication of something like that. If we turn to now, that's the internal context. So if we turn to looking at our external context, and here we want to look towards what might be some of the opportunities, and the next slide, the threats. These are actually factors that we could potentially exploit. So we're going to reflect a little bit on our strengths and maybe even our weaknesses to some extent, to see where it is that we might be able to have some of these opportunities that we can pursue. So, again, I've put up a couple of examples here. Innovation, if we want to become the educator in best practices, and the implication of that, again, using my rolling why, my 5 whys, would be, well, what does that mean? Well, it might mean that we become a thought leader. So, if we have a particular niche that we are becoming known for, and we become an educator in that niche, then potentially we become a thought leader and become recognised, and people potentially then start to refer back to us for advice. Again, I've got another client who is known for this. They're actually in a space where they've become quite specialised in the field that they work in, and to the extent now where they've got some fairly major suppliers or clients coming to them and asking them how would they actually solve this particular problem, because they've worked really hard at becoming this this thought leader or this educator. They're tremendous problem solvers in the field they work in. So the next thing is staffing. Again, might be there's some opportunities that we want to be the part of the process to be the best. Important to have the right people on board for that, so we need to do our analysis on our staff, and maybe opportunity might be diversification, and the implications of that might be that we can attract a wider audience, or one of the things I like to talk about is bigger share of wallet with existing clients, for example. A lot of us are potentially missing opportunities with our existing clients. Threats might be, these are external factors that cause trouble for the business. So again, it might come from the likes of competitors' aggressive marketing, pricing strategies, which in turn might mean that we've got a risk to our existing customers. Maybe they start to look over the fence and think, well, hang on a minute, maybe I'm not getting the best deal. It might mean that it's harder to attract new customers, and again, you can keep rolling with this. Legislative changes might mean we are facing things like increased compliance costs depending on the field of work that we're actually in. So what I'm trying to convey here is in that particular, this is a tool, and it's a very effective tool. It's an old one, but you know, it's a very effective tool to help us start to get down to some of the brutal truths and understanding of where it is that we are in now. It's one of a few tools, but I just thought that was one just to share with you tonight to help start this analysis for yourselves. And it's a very effective one, as I said. If we just skip across now to our where, so we've understood where it is that we are now. So if we want to move across to where, one of the things that I like to do is this sort of visioning exercise to try and understand what winning looks like. So, and the way I go about that is simply to ask a number of questions. And you know, when you in your workbooks, you'll actually have these questions, so I won't dwell too much on them. But it's questions just like, you know, what are our customers queuing up to buy from us? What is it that we're actually physically selling? Now, the way we do this exercise, what does winning look like in your business in 2014? I would actually make that your time frame. So if you were starting this process right now for yourselves and running through your own strategic planning, I would actually push that out to 3 years and say, you know, what does winning look like in your business in, say, 2016? And the way you do this is you physically put yourself in that position. So if it's December 2016 and I'm looking backwards, what are the responses in the present tense? To these sorts of questions. I'll just quickly give you an example. This is a hypothetical, but just to give you a sense. So once you've responded to all those questions, one thing I like to do is to actually come up with what I'm calling a winning statement. And we actually physically bring this down to a page. So actually wordsmith from the responses to those questions a winning statement. So in this particular hypothetical, we're saying we've got this total life stage care company. They've got a turnover in 2015-16 of 100 million. They've got their business headquartered in Brisbane. They've got branches in Queensland and New South Wales. They've got a different model, basically looking at the type of demographic of their particular residents that they take on board, and so forth, so that we get through to the page. Here they're talking about, you know, that we employ 225 staff. They maintain the highest standards of dignity, sincerity and professionalism for their residents. So the idea is that you develop your responses to each of the questions, and then you take the responses that you've put to those questions and you develop that into a winning statement. And the winning statement is written in the present tense as if you were already there. So effectively what you're saying is that I'm December 2016 and I'm looking backwards and this is what my business looks like. And from that point of view, I find this is a really powerful way to get some clarity. I've actually find when I do this exercise with people that there's some light bulbs that actually start to go on. And it won't be that necessarily the first time you do this that you'll get it right. I typically find that it's good to actually do your responses to the questions and then park it and come back to that maybe a week later and just reflect on that a little bit. Had an interesting exercise with the group that I was working on with this only a matter of weeks ago, and I think there was probably just a little bit of over-enthusiasm in the room when we were actually doing our responses to the questions, and it was interesting because one of the managers said, you know, I think we might have been smoking a bit when we physically started to put our responses together. So when we regrouped about a week later, in fact I think it was about a fortnight later, and reflected, we started to bring some reality checks back into their winning statement, and they've come up now with something that frankly they are totally committed to. It was really quite rewarding to see the level of alignment and commitment that came from these guys once they actually started to connect with the statement itself. Very powerful exercise. So once we've actually done that, the analogy, and again we're still here in the where, sorry. One of the things that I like to develop is this, and I use the game analogy. now really what it becomes is, well, how do we design our perfect game? What's our game plan going to look like? And the way I tend to approach this particular issue is to identify what are the game changes? And I try and limit ourselves to just 4 to 6. The temptation here is to actually explode this into 10 to 12, and again, this is where we start to get into the world of being overwhelmed, and not much happens. So this is one of the traps. So by keeping our focus down around that 2 to 3 years, what we are able to do and maintain our energy is to, well, what are the 4 to 6 things that we really need to focus on over the course of this next 2 to 3 years in order for us to actually change or transition our business from where it is now into what we've just described for ourselves in that winning statement. And these can be any number of different things. Some people might be that they want to look at products. It might be around our people. Another good one that comes up a lot is processes that I find typically comes up. It's a very big one often in a lot of businesses. As businesses have grown, processes have come under pressure. So that's another one that commonly comes up. But once we understand what those 4 to 6 things are, the next question that we need to answer for ourselves, and again, we're still in the where, is what does that actually mean? So this is just an example of this is actually a home building firm, and for them, their products, if they're excelling at their products, so again, they're answering the question here, what does it mean to excel in each of these game changes? What it means to them is 0 defects at walkthrough. It means that client feedback reflects 100% satisfaction. They have their books full for the next 6 months, and they're winning regional, state, and national awards. So for them, if they're actually excelling at delivering on their products, and these are the marks that they physically have to hit in order for them to achieve that outcome. Once we understand that, the next layer down, and if you can just visualize for a moment in your minds, what we're doing here is funneling down. So we've identified what our game changes are. We've now described for ourselves what it means to excel at each of those game changes. The next bit becomes, well, what is it that we need to do now? So if we're developing our perfect game, what is it that we physically need to do now? And this is where we get down to the level of physically identifying what I call the level 1 actions. So these are relatively high level, but what are the key elements, what are the key actions that we need to deliver on or achieve and do in order for us to get towards the outcomes? And here I've just split it between 180 days and 3 years, and importantly, you can see from here we've identified the action, but also the person that's going to be responsible for that. Very important that we actually get it to that sort of level. So then it gets down to execution. Now we're getting into the nitty-gritties of, well, how are we going to actually do that? How is it that we're going to physically execute? We've identified the actions, but this is the bit that really now starts to get down to putting some real rubber, if you like, on the road. All we've done at this stage is a lot of our planning, identified actions. Now it's about, well, what systems do we need to put into place to implement our game plan? There's a couple of key elements for mine in order to do this. The first one is establishing what I'm calling the KPIs, the key performance indicators. So for each of our game changes, that we've identified, we need to come up with the 1 to 2 KPIs, measurements that are physically going to tell us whether or not we're on track. And then we also need to set up the management reporting systems that are going to tell us and track towards those things. So in terms of how we do that, this is where we actually start to need to prioritize. It's not acceptable for us any longer to just take on our other issues that come up on a day-to-day basis, which are typically we're reacting to situations. This is something that needs to be allocated. When I'm working with people, and even for myself, I actually make this a physical, it's the same time every single month on a month-by-month basis that we sit down and we actually analyse. And on a rolling 30-day basis, we're actually analysing what have we achieved according to our measurements, our KPIs, and what actions have been delivered upon in this last 30 days, and what are the next 30 days. This is physically, if you like a management meeting that we sit down and we commit to every single month. So it's actually prioritised as time out of the diary that we actually prioritise for it. It's important to identify the priorities and the resources that are required to actually do this, because we need to give permission to people to actually take some time out. This is important enough for you to actually be allocated time to do that. Communicating to the team is important. Next week I'm actually physically sitting down with one of the people that I'm working with, and we're actually communicating. We're doing a presentation to the whole team about their strategic plan, and we're going to, in that process, tell them where it is that we're needing their help in the delivery of that, so that we get in. The whole goal of that is alignment, bringing people around and being aligned with and enthusiastic about the direction we're taking. It's important to break the actions down into manageable tasks. A lot of actions tend to be very high level. We need to break those down into their subtasks. So a lot of the actions we typically identify in this process tend to be fairly high level. There are a lot of subtasks that need to be identified and broken down. It's important to measure, and of course we all know with measurement it's about it being a number, a dollar, or a percentage. It can be only one of those three things, and not very many of us celebrate. Once we actually kick a goal, we need to physically sit down and have some form of celebration, and I've found that to be something that's very important to keep people enthusiastic and motivated towards outcomes. So again, just reiterating, so what I walk through is direction really is about understanding our now and starting to move within understanding what some of our where is. So until we do those two things, percentage-wise, I proportionately spend a lot of time in that now. A lot of people it's quite boring, can be quite boring, but the better that we do that, the better the foundation of the house it is that we build by really analysing thoroughly that now. We start to bring accountability into place when we start to look at our where, and particularly execution when we start to move towards our how. So look, that's a quick, very quick summary. It's obviously, there's a lot more to it than what I've just done, but hopefully I've just been able to give you an overview of some of the key elements that I use and the sort of tools that I use when I'm doing, and hopefully in your workbooks you've got now something, a framework that you can physically take and use for yourself in your own business. Happy to take any questions. If there's any questions of clarity or any specific questions that people want to have, I'll just pause for a moment and see if there's anything that comes through.
Greg, Russell here. If anybody has a microphone and would like to ask a question, if you just type sort of something like yes or have a question or something into the question area, then we can unmute your microphone. You can actually ask it verbally. So.
Happy to take any questions.
Yeah, Anthony's put his hand up, so I'll just my microphone, Greg.
Okay.
Anthony, you have a question? Was that a mistake?
You there, Anthony? Might have been a mistake, Russell.
I think so.
Oh, here we go. Some of the narrative on the slides in the workbook are unreadable when you print the workbook. Okay. Okay. We'll have a look at that, Philip. Yeah, we'll see what we can do about that, Philip.
Okay. We'll see if we can get you a better copy of that. Yeah. So after the webinar, we will we'll put the recording up, and we'll also put a link to the workbook and also to a copy of the slides, Greg, if that's all right. Just
that's fine.
Download them and be there. That's good.
Lisa's just responded to that with regards to the slides. We'll give them the link to their presentation slides.
Sure.
So, Michael Rodfall, what do you think? What do you do if you get items coming up in the strengths and weaknesses, coming up as strengths and weaknesses in the SWOT? So, Michael, if I'm interpreting what you're asking correctly, are you saying that they come up in both strengths and weaknesses? And that can commonly be the case. A strength can also be a weakness. So, and what we've got to identify there, if that is the case, is whether or not there are any sort of remedial actions that we need to think about in either our opportunities or our threats if they present for us. Not sure if I'm interpreting your question correctly there, Michael, but I think that's what you're asking. Trevor's asking, are the principles the same for a sole trader? Pretty much. Like this, the unfortunate thing, of course, for a sole trader is that we're it. So a lot of the things that we're talking about, frankly, relate back to ourselves, and it can sometimes be a little difficult to be objective when you haven't really got somebody there challenging you around some of these things. And my advice as a sole trader, if you could possibly achieve it, is to have somebody come along and facilitate this process with you, so that they can actually challenge you and really get down to understanding the brutal truth around particular situations with that. So thanks for that, Trevor. And thanks, Michael. Yeah, hopefully that responded to your question correctly in terms of what you're asking there. Should you carry out this process with senior management as well as at a board level? Yes, Michael, is the answer to that. That this is a top-down and bottom-up exercise. So I would generally suggest that at a board level that there needs to be some generalised overarching direction that the board would be responsible for in communicating back to its management team. But the management team need to actually then, from the bottom up, be talking about some of the elements from the coalface that, frankly, may or may not impinge or impact on that. And by encouraging our people to be involved, there potentially are opportunities, threats, maybe even strengths and weaknesses that we haven't identified. So I think from that perspective, you do need to make sure that you create it from the top down and also the bottom up. I find that's a very useful exercise to do. It shouldn't be just top down, is my view. I don't know if you have a view on that, Russell, but that's my feeling.
Yeah, Greg, I mean, I think it just depends on the size of the business, but I find that it's important to have buy-in at a number of levels, and with the board or with the owners, I find it's important that they set the direction for the business because they actually own the business or have major control or responsibility for it, and then management need to buy into that. So, but it's good to have everybody's input at some point. So, I see the board set the direction, and then I guess management are the ones that have to actually deliver on the outcome. So they should be heavily involved in the how part for sure, certainly, and certainly come on board with the where.
Yep.
Question there from Felicity as well.
Oh, do we offer services online or only one-on-one? I guess the response to that is both. It depends on exactly what people's needs are in terms of how that's actually achieved. So it just depends on the intensity and what it is that people are physically looking for as to how we deliver on that from an advice point of view.
Very good. All right, Greg, that looks like we've run out of questions.
It's drying up, yep.
Can I just thank you on behalf of everybody for your presentation tonight? It was excellent. And we'll post the links to Greg's website and also to the resources that we've got here tonight. And We thank you all very much for coming along. Again, I thank Greg for the night, and we wish you all a great night. Thanks very much.
Thank you, everybody.